Hello, and welcome to the third of our annual capital budget training. In this training, we're going to cover step 2 and 3, which are the CapEx workflow steps of this process. The first step is step 2, which may be an optional step for our community managers on the call. For our community managers, if you only have access to one property, you're going to see that CapEx basis for that property listed right here. So you see how I see tax. And that will tell us which workflow to use in step 3. Now, if you are a regional manager, you'll need to actually select the property. So I'm going to show you what that looks like. You're going to select the property. You're going to click on View Report. You may need to click it twice. And then from there, you're going to see the CapEx basis that you're going to be using for step 3. So it's that simple. Step 2, you may even not have to do it. You may just see the information there, or you just need to select your property and hit View Report twice to refresh the screen. Within step 3, you are going to determine which CapEx account to use, or based on this CapEx basis value. Just to kind of provide some insight here, some of you may not even need to complete step 2 because you may know if your property is next point, meaning your owner is next point, or if your property is Stoneweg, meaning your owner is Stoneweg, that indicates that you're going to be using those next point or Stoneweg workflows. But in this case, I'm going to go to the gap or tax workflow, which is where everyone who is not whose properties are not owned by next point or Stoneweg is going to go. So I'm going to hit gap or tax. And this is the most complicated of the 3. So I'm also going to go to this one because if you are next point and Stoneweg, you're going to be following this exact same process. You're just going to have slightly fewer questions. So as long as you got the gap or tax workflow down, you got the whole process down. So for this, I'm going to select my property, and like all of our other trainings, if you are a community manager, you don't actually need to select your property. It's only us, those team members have access to multiple properties who need to make that selection. From there, I see my job code that I created in video number 2. If you haven't checked that one out, this was created in video number 2, which covered step 1 of the process. And the very first question I have is the project part of an approved rehab renovation? Now, keep in mind, I'm adding in my annual capital budget. So by definition, I should not be adding in anything in here that has been previously approved or is part of a rehab or renovation. I'm adding in my capital items that are non-recurring that I am going to be requesting from the owner for the very first time, or that have not been previously approved at any point. So I'm going to go ahead and hit no. Has the cost been incurred for replacements in individual units, carpet, appliances, HVAC fixtures, etc.? If the cost was for replacements in individual units, that would be something that I would be budgeting on the operating side. That would actually be in our turn costs or R&M. So I'm going to go ahead and select no. Has the expense been incurred to replace personal property, office computers, copier machine, etc.? Now, let's say for the rest of the purposes of this training that I am looking at a roofing replacement. So I'm going to go ahead and select no. Does purchase item have useful life greater than 1 year and cost greater than $1,000 in total, or is part of a larger project that exceeds $1,000? Yes, my roofing replacement would exceed $1,000. Is the expense to repair or for routine maintenance? I'm going to select no. Once I selected no, you'll see I had 2 questions pop up as does not apply. And then is the expense the purchase of a new or distinct asset? I'm going to select no. And then is the expense a purchase that extends the useful life of an existing asset? I'm going to select yes. Once I selected yes, you'll see that all of the rest of my answers filled in with does not apply, which means I am done with this workflow. One thing you may have noticed as I was completing the workflow is that I completed all of the questions in order. Now, we're all human, we all make mistakes. So if you get to the end of this workflow and you see that for some reason it's capturing your CapEx account, maybe it's a rehab account or a R&M maintenance expense account, which means you actually can't use Project Pro for this expense, you can go back here and you can hit start over and do the workflow again. But what you can't do is just come in here and change the answer. It's very, very, very important. I say 3 varies because it is just that important that we're doing this workflow in order because each of the questions are connected to the very next question and they all feed from each other. So if we just go in here and we change one question, we're not going to get the right answer, because if we had answered maybe a yes where we should have put a no, we will not have everything in the right order because everything below it will be filled out. So if you do need to start over, we're all human, it happens. Go ahead and hit start over. Don't go in and just change a question and then hit view report. So from here, I'm going to go back to the workflow and I will see that I now have been granted permission to use the 1600 account. So if I've been granted permission to use the 1600 accounts, but I received direction from my owner that I actually want to be using the 8600 accounts, and now keep in mind, this is strictly with ownership approval. We should not be making any changes to our accounting CapEx policies unless the owner has given us approval to do so. And that approval, we want to make sure that we're getting that each year to make sure that we have the appropriate policies set up in here. If you do get that approval, we do allow you to override it. So you go in here to account override. You would select, so once again, I'm going to select my property, which you do not have to do if you're a community manager. I'm going to select the job code that I had listed, but for the most part, you're just going to have it default to the one job code you have in your system. I see that I am capitalizing to 1600, but once again, I received that ownership approval to capitalize to 8600. So I'm going to click that. I'm going to enter in comments. This is one area of Project Pro or of your annual capital budget process that comments are not optional. So I'm going to want to say owner approved this. I'm just going to add in a test for my sake for this training. And then I'm also going to add in the date that the owner approved it. So let's say they approved it on July 24th. And then I'm going to hit view report. And from there, I now see that for this particular job code, I now have approval to capitalize that to 8600 instead of 1600. So now when I go into the next step of the process, I will have access to 8600 and I will no longer have access to 1600. And I will see you later on that training where we'll cover how to actually add the roofing expense with the 8600 account.